gone since COVID. I do not work directly with clients. So, I mean, Amanda, if you would like to chime in on that, just to, just to answer the question of how trafficking has gone during COVID.
Sure, yeah, and I think can also contribute. So I hope that you jump in. What we've seen are those trafficking numbers are consistent. People being trafficked. There's still, quite a local market, even though some of those larger events that do bring in potential buyers were not held in Omaha this year. So like the Berkshire Hathaway event or the College World Series, those did not take place. But there is a very active trafficking business in Omaha, unfortunately.
I would definitely piggyback on what Amanda's saying. I have not seen a slowdown, I guess, if you will, which it does make sense how you might think that, but things have remained just as consistent, if not at times, I feel like even picked up a little bit, whether or not that's because, I don't know, I feel like various reasons, but I certainly haven't seen any sort of like delay or drop in phone calls or, people reaching out for assistance.
I would assume that as well. Like I said, I do not directly work with clients, but I know many organizations across the United States, and ours included, received more phone calls due to domestic violence, and we know that violence does not just mean that, it could also mean trafficking as well, because many trafficking victims are in relationships with their traffickers. So just thinking about how a lot of these intimate partner crimes have increased or at least stayed the same during the pandemic doesn't mean that trafficking was immune to that, for sure. Any other comments or questions on what trafficking looks like? I'd love to hear from people to know what they think trafficking looks like. Okay, great. So we have a comment here from Wendy saying that many survivors who have been out of the life for a long time have had to return to prostitution because of financial issues, that they can't find work or need food. Absolutely. So we found that a lot too. We've seen that a lot of people, they struggle with leaving trafficking because it sustains a lifestyle that they're used to, whether that's a place to stay or having food, shelter, people to come home to. And once you leave that, you're having to rebuild. So I think that's a really good point, Wendy. Aubrey, I also see your hand up. You are welcome to unmute and share.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I think when it comes to, what trafficking looks like and how COVID has impacted that, we know that, so many of the barriers of trafficking are economic barriers and just trauma in general. And we've experienced such a widespread amount of trauma just socially in the last year. So it makes sense that we are seeing people return to the life or, having to, fall back on sex work, especially online right now, which might provide actually some safety to victims where we see a lot of things happening more behind the screen during COVID. But, I think we have victims at a higher risk health-wise during COVID, having to do what they have to do to make ends meet. So,
yeah. Definitely. I think it's a really good point, Aubrey, especially that economic or financial piece, because, we know a lot of people have lost their jobs during this pandemic. And if you are someone who has, if you are someone who has struggled with leaving the life and, now you're in between jobs, you're going to go back to what I think that's something part of human nature that we all want to go back to, something that we know works, and just to have that sustainability. Great point. Jody, I see your hand up as well.
So in the healthcare setting, what human trafficking looks like for us is it varies. We have had patients in our labor and delivery department that have come in that don't have prenatal care. We have had people that have presented to the emergency department for suicidal ideation, that once we, develop that relationship and talk to them, they have been identified as victims of trafficking. We have a lot of intimate partner violence patients that we see that through communication have been identified as victims of trafficking. So when it comes to the healthcare setting, when we answer the question, what does human trafficking look like? It looks like every patient that walks through our doors. There's not one specific type of patient. We see patients that are well off that are victims of human trafficking. And then we see homeless patients that are victims of human trafficking. We also see labor trafficking as well as sex trafficking. I know that sex trafficking is usually the hot topic when we talk about human trafficking, but I just want everybody to be aware that labor trafficking is also happening in our cities across the state of Nebraska.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Jody, for that, especially the healthcare side, healthcare perspective, because you're right. You know, it could be anyone that walks into your clinic or into your office. I think, you know, one thing that we have to combat in this line of work is this image of what we think a victim looks like. Oftentimes we're thinking of a woman, oftentimes we're thinking of a white woman at that. So it's important that, you know, we have to broaden our horizons and break our own biases of what we think a trafficking victim looks like. I see some comments in the chat. Anne commented that human trafficking looks like controlling and involves brainwashing to the survivor. She has seen survivors that appear fearful or secretive about the involvement and what has been done to them. Absolutely. A lot of human trafficking survivors do not believe themselves as victims. It takes a long time for that wall to be broken down and those stigmas to be broken down as well. Great. Any other comments before I move on to the next piece? Okay. So I did also see a comment that wants the basic definition of what human trafficking is. And I think that's really important for us to define. So the definition of human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, and coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act, unless it is a minor. So essentially what this means is that, you know, for a minor, you do not have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. Any type of commercial sex act under the age of 18 is automatically viewed as trafficking. And typically what the question is that I get for that is like, okay, well, then who's considered the trafficker in this situation? Then in this case, it would be the buyer. So anyone who is buying sex from a minor would be considered the trafficker and could be charged with trafficking, okay? And so there are many acts for sex trafficking as well. And I want to focus on recruitment here. So, and the reason why I want to focus on recruitment is because we've seen that's probably the most popular. That's what a lot of people do get charged for when they are caught with trafficking. So recruitment could look like going out and finding people to traffic. It could be someone who is already trafficked, also now being the person who is going out recruiting people. So for someone that's young, this could be a friend approaching you saying, hey, I know how you can make money tonight. And then that leads them into a commercial sex act by fraud. So that could be, you know, saying that, oh, you know, it's not a big deal. Like, it's just a job that you have to do. You know, it's real quick, real fast, not giving them details of what it could be. Or they could just outright lie about what the job is. They could say that it's modeling, but it's actually leading into a commercial sex act. So this is what trafficking, this is the definition of sex trafficking. One other thing I want to ask is, what are some myths that you've heard about human trafficking? I know one of the questions I get a lot are about things we see on social media. So I want to hear about some different myths that you all have heard about around human trafficking. And feel free to raise your hand and unmute or put it in the chat. Becky, that is a great one. Is the one that I love to talk about the most, is that trafficking happens in Walmart or Target parking lots. The other one I hear a lot is Menards parking lots. This is great that you are sharing that, because that's one that I've had to talk to a lot of people about. So a lot of times people believe that human trafficking is related to kidnapping, but in actuality, a lot of trafficking happens through grooming. That does not mean that kidnapping doesn't happen, but it does mean that it's rare. It's not something that typically happens when someone is being trafficked. Oftentimes when kidnapping is occurring, it means that the person is being kidnapped and used or abused by that one person. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be trafficked. So that's a great point. Another myth is that all sex work is trafficking. Yeah, Amanda, that's a good point. There is this belief that, all type of sex work is trafficking, but some people do sex work on their own choice. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are being hurt or being abused or being coerced into the work. Shannon shared Save the Children. Yes. I know a couple months ago, Save the Children ended up being this big thing on social media that a lot of people were participating in out of the goodness of their heart because they believed in the mission of Save the Children. Children shouldn't be trafficked, which is 100% correct. But the problem with movements like this is that it actually caused our National Human Trafficking Hotline to have wait times because so many people were calling in about things that they might have seen, something that they saw on Facebook, these different myths like the Walmart parking lots. So it's good that you all are here to receive education on what you should actually do when it comes to trafficking. Zip ties, and then social media also saying the 1F written on windows of cars. Yes. So zip ties, there was this thing going around on Facebook and other social media platforms that people were putting zip ties on the side view mirrors of cars to mark their victims. And when people looked into it, people meaning police precincts, they found nothing. They found that this actually led to nothing. It's just something that people decided to start up on social media. And same with the writing the numbers and symbols on car windows as well. So Shannon wrote 1F, which means one female, saying that people were marking windows to say that it's a one woman that's alone. And police officers also found that there has been nothing led to trafficking there either. These are some great myths to talk about. Anne also said another myth that she's heard is that it only happens in large cities. It's not only large cities, it's all over the place. Yeah, so even small towns in Nebraska could be participating in trafficking. Jennifer added, Omaha is one of the biggest areas where sex trafficking happens. It's a big area, but it's not the biggest. I oftentimes hear from people, they're like, Omaha has the highest human trafficking rate. No, we don't. We do have a higher rate with about 675 victims per month. That's Omaha. And for the state of Nebraska, it's about 900 victims per month. That was found out in 2017. Traffickers are big, scary criminals and can't be friends or family of their survivor. This is a great point, AJ. So typically traffickers are someone you already know. Just like when it comes to domestic violence or sexual violence, oftentimes your perpetrator is someone you know. All right. Jody added that we oftentimes hear while doing education is that the person knows that this is wrong and that they choose to do this. This is so important, right? Because that's what the whole force, fraud, and coercion piece is about. It gets to the point where, victims feel like they don't have a choice. Oftentimes when it's the force or fraud, they think that they're going into something else, or even coercion, once again, think that they're going into something else or being blackmailed into doing this. Great point. Oh, Monica, this is a great point. So she wrote that one thing that she hears is that women get brought in from other countries to be sex workers and that Americans are not trafficked. Wow, this is a great point because in actuality, most trafficking victims are United States citizens or are here legally under a visa or any other type of citizenship or residency. Yes. Portia added that it can only happen to poor people in poor communities. No, trafficking happens with anybody. There is no socioeconomic background that is immune from trafficking. Wow, you all have some great myths here, and I wish I could hit all of them, but I want to make sure that we have enough time for everything else. So I'm glad that you all are at a place where you understand these different myths that we have on trafficking. So I want to go ahead and move on into our next section, and which I believe is Wendy. So if Wendy, you would like to begin, that would be great.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Well, actually, let's wait to share my screen for a minute. So, hi everyone. My name is Wendy Barnes. I am the coordinator for Common Spirit Health's Violence and Human Trafficking Prevention and Response Program. Just to kind of give you a little background what this is, Dignity Health has a human trafficking response program. Their focus is internal efforts training healthcare providers on how to identify and respond to victims of human trafficking. Catholic Health Initiatives, CHI, has the violence prevention program, which goes out into the community trying to reduce the violence that is happening near their hospitals. So with the merger of CHI and Dignity Health into Common Spirit Health, we now merge those two programs also. So the reason that I am so passionate about this program and feel blessed to be a part of it is I am a survivor of sex trafficking. During the time that I was trafficked, I had multiple encounters with healthcare providers. And so this program is very near and dear to my heart. So today I'm going to be sharing my story with you, and my story can be traumatizing. It can make people uncomfortable. I share my story the way that I feel most comfortable sharing it. I've tried to make the G-rated, version before, and it is no longer authentic to me. And so during this next 20 minutes, you may feel very uncomfortable. You may start crying, and you know what? That's okay. I always say that in order to help, we must first understand. I want you to understand the pain that I was in. I want you to understand how uncomfortable it was. And then with that knowledge, with those uncomfortable feelings, I hope that it will inspire each of you to be able to do more. I also just want to make sure to let you know, this is one story of so many. Please don't walk away from this thinking, oh, I know what human trafficking is because I heard Wendy speak. There are so many books written by survivors of human trafficking. I highly recommend going out and buying a couple of them. One, it supports the survivors who have, gone out and, they've written a book, they've shared their stories. It helps them, and it's going to help you to have a more broader understanding of what human trafficking is. So let's go ahead and share my screen here. So I always like to soften the blow of my story. This is my daughter, Latasha. You're going to hear about Latasha in my story today. We live together in Southern California with her two dogs, Panda Bear and Scruffy. And so I have written a book. If you are interested in learning more, it is available on Amazon. So there were 4 factors that contributed to me being vulnerable to a trafficker when I was 15 years old. Those factors were bullying, parental absence, poverty, and child sexual abuse. Most people assume, rightfully so, that probably the sexual abuse is what traumatized me the most. But in actuality, it was the bullying. I have healed and moved on from the other 3 factors. Being bullied as a child still sticks with me today. That trauma is still there. So when I was 15 years old, I felt lost, alone, and unloved. Not having 2 parents there, not, living in poverty. I remember, going to school with the secondhand clothes and being made fun of. So one time a neighbor girl came over and invited me to a swimming pool party. And I just remember being so excited because nobody had ever asked me to go somewhere with them before. So I went to the swimming pool party with her, and I didn't know what people do at swimming pool parties. So I just kind of followed in her footsteps. I just walked right behind her. And she walked up to this guy and she says, "Hey, Greg, I want you to meet my friend Wendy. Wendy, I want you to meet my friend Greg." I remember Greg reached out his hand. He looked me right in the eye and he said, well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Wendy. And instantly my heart started going pity pat. But I could quickly see that, you know, he was very popular. I could tell that, you know, all the other kids were like hanging around him and stuff. And so I knew that somebody like that, well, they would never like somebody like me. But on my first day of high school, the 10th grade, I was walking through the hallways and there he is. And he recognized me. He remembered me. He remembered my name. Hey, Wendy, how you doing? Like, I'm good. How are you? Say, hey, can I get your number? Yeah, you can have my number. I gave him my telephone number and I didn't think he'd really call, but he did. He was interested in me. He talked to me for hours and hours. Sometimes all night long, we would stay up talking to each other and then still going to high school the next day. Just to clarify, he was 16 years old. Well, it didn't take very long at all for us to hook up. And well, I quickly became pregnant with his baby. So this is him and I. I'm probably about 6 months pregnant here. I'm still living with my mother. You know, she's completely supporting me. He's living with his family still. And he's giving me the dream that I've always wanted. He's planting that seed of we are going to live happily ever after. You know, once we graduate from high school, then we're going to go out and get jobs, and then we're going to get married and we'll live happily ever after. And that's all I ever wanted. Well, right after I turned 17, we had Latasha. By this point, the abuse kind of started, the verbal abuse had started, but I did not recognize it as verbal abuse. I just saw that I wasn't good enough. I kept thinking, well, I'm not good enough. And that's the way he would make me feel. But then he was very, very good at breaking me down, but then raising me up, telling me how much he loved me. So when Latasha was about 3 months old, he came to me and said, you know, Wendy, the only way that we're ever going to make it together is if you move out of your mom's house. I'm like, and how's that supposed to happen? He says, well, I got a plan. All you have to do is you and Latasha move into a shelter downtown Seattle. Once you are there, you will be considered emancipated. You can then go to the welfare office, get a welfare check, we get an apartment, and we live happily ever after. I completely believed him. I know I was scared. I knew my mom would not approve, so I basically ran away from home. He dropped Latasha and I off at a shelter downtown Seattle. My introduction to the shelter was, here's your bedroom, here is the bathroom across the hall. You leave every morning at 7 a.m. and you come back every night at 7 p.m. That was it. That was all. They did not tell me that I could come to them and ask for any needs that I had. I remember I made sure I took all of the diapers and all of the formula my mom had purchased. And going up to the welfare office, like Greg had instructed me to, the only thing is back in those days, it took about 45 days to get your first welfare check. So after a week, the diapers and the formula are gone. I called up Greg and I got a hold of him from, using this, it was a phone for the homeless people, basically. So I got a hold of him and I said, hey, Greg, we're out of diapers, we're out of formula. What are we going to do? He said, oh, I got a job we can do. Don't worry about it. I said, oh, okay, good. He goes, yeah, but you got to love Latasha a lot to do this job. I was like, well, I love Latasha. I can do it. Okay. For some reason, I thought we were going to go clean somebody's house because he had told me previously that's how he had gotten money. And so I was just thinking, okay, this house must be like really dirty, but that's okay. We can do this. He goes, you know what? Just meet me up on Yesler Avenue. At that, I was really excited because he hadn't even come by to see me during that week. And so I bundled up Latasha with her wet diaper and I walked up to where he had told me to meet him. As I approached him, he took Latasha from me and he was doing all that goo goo gaga stuff, all that stuff that good daddies do. And I just remember thinking how lucky I was to be with such a wonderful person who actually loved me and cared about me. After a few minutes, I was like, so what's the job we're going to do? And he says, well, all you have to do is walk out onto the street. A man is going to stop and pick you up. He's going to offer you money to have sex with him. You have sex with him right there in the car. And when you're done, you have money for her diapers and formula. What? What are you talking about? He says, well, don't you love Latasha? Yeah, I love Latasha, but how am I supposed to do something like that? I said, well, if you were truly a good mother and you loved your daughter, you would be willing to do anything for her. I remember this kept going back and forth, and I just couldn't wrap my head around why he would be asking me to do such a thing. I couldn't imagine anybody mistaking me for a prostitute. I've seen prostitutes in the movies. They have high heels, mini skirt, lots of makeup, and big hair. I had tennis shoes, jeans, and a sweatshirt on. I remember the straw that broke the camel's back was when he checked her diaper and saw that it was wet and snapped at me, why is her diaper wet? I told you we don't have any more. He said, well, then you better get on out there. I walked out there in a state of shock, just not feeling like I had any choice of what I was going to do. I was scared to death. The one thing that I visibly remember today is when that car pulled over only seconds after I had walked out there. I remember as I went to go open the car door, my hand was shaking so bad I could barely open it. I got into the car. He offered me money to have sex with him. I didn't say anything. He then told me that he knew of a place that we could go and do it in the bushes. I still didn't say anything. He drove to the location. We got out of his car. We walked into the woods a little ways, and he handed me the money. And well, thank God he did, because Greg hadn't even told me that I'm supposed to ask for it first. As I started taking off my clothes, I started to silently pray. Please, God, don't let this happen to me. Please, God, some way, somehow, just don't let this happen to me. Please make this stop. As I laid down on the ground and he climbed on top of me, I looked up to the sky, and it was then that I realized there is no God. Or maybe worse even yet, God just didn't care about me. It was only a couple moments later, he got off of me. He got back into his car. He dropped me off where he had picked me up. As I approached Greg, don't ask me why, I automatically reached my hand out to hand him the money, as if to say, see, I am worthy. See, I do love Latasha. See, I am a good mother. And as he took the money from my hand, I turned around and I started violently throwing up. The only way that I can explain how I felt at that point is I felt like I threw up my soul. We got Tasha's diapers, we got her formula, and but then the next week, well, we need more money. From that point, Greg built and ran one of the largest prostitution rings on the West Coast at that time frame. It consisted of anywhere between 4 to 10 girls at any given time. It spanned from Seattle, Washington to Southern California. I think the most powerful tools, well, he got us, the tactics he used were, he got us addicted to crack cocaine. He would use threats against our parents, against our loved ones. I'll kill your mom if you try and leave me. But I think the most powerful tool he used was his words. God, you're so pathetic. You're so stupid. You can't do anything right, can you? It was with those words that he would break us down into nothing. For the next 13 years, I was trafficked by him. I had 3 children with him. I had encounters with police officers, with the court system, with, healthcare providers. But know that we always were on our best behavior to not let anybody else know what was happening. I know for me, like I always presented as just a single mother with a child. And then when we had another child, I'm a single mother with 2 kids. I know some of the tactics he used. I know my time is getting short, so I want to be mindful of that. Traffickers are very good at what they do. They get to know their victims in order to know what tactics will use that they can use to manipulate them. I remember one young girl that he had got. I remember for 2 years she was with us. And the only threat that he ever had to make, he never even beat her. All he would have to do to get her to get in the line was he would walk over to the phone, pick it up and say, "Do you want me to call your mother right now and tell her exactly what you've been doing?" She would just break down. "Please, Greg, don't call my mom. Please, Greg, don't call my mom. What do you want me to do?" She would do whatever he told her to because she was so afraid of her mother finding out what he had done to her. Do your children know how much you love them? Do they know that they can always come to you with any problem and you will help them? I know for me, it was my children. I remember one time, I left him multiple times, but I remember one of the major times that I tried leaving him. He beat one of the other girls. Like my punishment a lot of times was he would beat one of the other girls and I would have to stand there and watch it. And he would tell me, "This is your fault. This is your fault. This is happening because of you." Because I have no problem. Beat me, please. Please beat me. Please don't ever, ever, ever make somebody suffer on my behalf. And so I did whatever Greg told me to do. I did a lot of really bad things because I did not want the other victims being beat. One of the times he put me in a room for 3 days. I was smoking crack cocaine. I was awake for 3 whole days. He was just berating me for 3 days until finally he put a Bible in front of my face and said, "Put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that if you ever leave me again, may God strike our son down in a painful and horrible death." I did what Greg told me to do. I made the promise so that the pain and the torture would stop. My rescue came in the form of a 2-year prison sentence. When the police came in to arrest him, I was too afraid to talk. They brought in 2 male police officers. And one of the rules is you're not allowed to talk to men unless they're tricks. So when 2 male police officers came in, I wasn't allowed to talk to them. And so I put my eyes to the ground and I didn't say a word. They said, "Fine, you want to play that game? You're going to be charged with everything he's being charged with." I had 26 felonies. My bail was $3 million. So after getting out of prison, I just started putting my life back together. I was finally able to, it took me a really long time to, one of the comments in this section was about brainwashing. And yes, I was completely brainwashed by this person. All of his victims were brainwashed by him. And it took me years, I want to say probably about 6 years to completely unbrainwash myself. And I don't even know, not heal all the way, just unbrainwash myself from the things that he had done. So I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions and answers. And I want to share the nurse practitioner. I know there's a lot of nurses on here, so let me just share this one quick story. So there was a nurse one time that really touched me. It was actually 2 weeks, I want to say like a month or 2 before I ended up getting arrested and going to prison. But I remember I was pregnant and I was going to see her. She was like my OBGYN. She was a nurse practitioner. And I remember you know, I was always really careful to, you know, not let her see what was going on. But over time, you know, because you have to keep seeing the same doctor. I remember one time she stopped. It was right before I was giving birth, maybe a couple weeks before I was going to give birth. And she said, Wendy, if something were wrong, would you tell me? And I remember my first thought was, God, I really hate having to lie to her because she's really nice to me. But then I quickly realized that question was safe enough to where she can't call the police or CPS on me because I tell her, no, I wouldn't tell you if something were wrong. So I was brave enough and I told her, no. She then said, if there was help, if we could find you help, would you accept help? At that point, the vision of help went through my head. And that vision was the police barging down our front door with their guns drawn, Greg grabbing our 2 kids, using them as hostages, our entire apartment getting shot up and destroyed, and me and the kids sitting outside in the rain with no place to go. That was my vision of help. So of course, I very politely and kindly said, no, thank you. I don't need any help. I don't need any help. And at that point, I just needed to get out of there. I needed to go home. You know, I needed to go where, you know, I knew that I, you know, I felt like I was maybe getting into trouble there. But it was on my way home that I started to feel the seed that that nurse had planted. And there was a realization that went through my head. So understand that the words I'm about to say are not words that went through my head. It was a shift in my thinking or a realization. And that was simply, when was the last time I felt safe enough to speak the word no? And when had anyone ever in my life respected my no? That nurse did plant a seed that day. And over time, that seed has grown. And it is a part of the bouquet of flowers that I am today. And that bouquet of flowers was all seeds planted from other people. So I really want to encourage each and every single one of you, never underestimate the power of planting a seed. Don't go in with the rescue mentality, because you will not. This is all about planting seeds and supporting victims to empower them to rescue themselves. And I can go on and on. So, but let me go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing here so we can open up to. So how's everybody going? Is everybody, oh, okay. I see some of the questions. So Wendy, what happened to your children? Were they put in the system? How were you able to reunite with them? Yes. So all 3 of my children were taken from me. They were put into foster care for about 6 months until the court system then gave them to his mother. So they were raised by his mom, who, yes, was still under control of him. And so it was messy. It was very messy, but I can tell you that today, you know, I have a very close relationship with my oldest and youngest. My middle one, he still has a lot of trauma, which I understand that he's still working through, but I still support him. So, any other questions?
Wendy, I just want to take a moment and thank you so much on behalf of everyone for sharing your story. It's so personal, and you being so vulnerable and courageous to share it with us. So thank you so much. I'm sure everyone has lots of thoughts and feelings going on. I know I do. I know there's another question, we'll get to that, but just, I guess, think about if anyone's willing to share some of those thoughts or perspectives. You might not think maybe it's worth it, but there adds encouragement to Wendy, and not only could help someone else who's on the call. Was his mom aware of what he was doing to you or others? Was a question.
Yes, and it was very, it was accepted. You have to realize that where we came from, the town that we were in, the only, to be successful, a Black man to be successful in that area with the information in that family, the three options he had was drug dealing, pimping, or rapping. Be a rapper or a drug dealer or a pimp. And that's basically, it was almost the family business. I mean, it wasn't hardcore like others, everybody held real jobs and everything, but this, hustling was very accepted and encouraged.
What is your advice? Oh, sorry, I skipped one. Here we go. Do you have a relationship with her now? And then also, where was your mom in this story?
My mom, she was constantly trying to get me back. She was always trying to get me, but you have to realize my mother had her own mental health issues. We did not really realize this. She did not have parenting skills. Thus the reason I never felt loved. Why would I not feel loved when I'm 15 years old? So my mom did have her issues and problems, but one thing is that she was always, always there for me. Anytime I called her and said, Mom, I want to come home, she said, get here now. Come sleep on my couch. She would come out and try and find us at times and try to always make connections. But the thing is, whenever I would go see my mom or see her on a more casual basis, when I would come home to Greg, I would be tortured for a couple of days. And so I finally learned, oh, wait a minute, if I go see Mom, I'm going to be tortured. So yeah, Mom, no, I don't want to see you. Oh, I lost your telephone number, whatever. My mom today, she's passed away, but we did, before she passed away, we were able to really reunite and nurture that relationship as much as it could be nurtured with two very traumatized people. So.
What is your advice for girls going through the same situation now?
If I got to talk to somebody, I would just find supportive people. You have to find people. I think that's the thing, is in my life, and I think in the lives of many people that are in this situation, they don't have safe grown-ups to go to. And so, I would just tell them, that they are powerful. I would tell them, that I don't know. That is a tough question. I don't know. It's just, I know that because it's so complex. It's not just one thing. It is, their own self-esteem. How is do they have a dream? I know for me, I could never envision my future. I could never, it started when I was, as a child being raised somewhat in the church, but I remember, it was all about Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. And so when I was 12 years old and somebody said, Wendy, what are you going to be when you grow up? I said, what do you mean grow up? Jesus is coming, and it's like, so I never, and then right from that, I ended up with Greg, in which I thought I would die in the life, then by the time I get out of prison and I'm almost a grown up, I'm like, oh God, I've been living that way of living just in this trauma and only be able to see my life right now. So I would definitely, sit down with them and, let's plan out your future. Let's talk about your future. Let's answer all of your questions. I think we need to start instead of protecting our children, we need to start preparing our children. Children are going to grow up no matter what. You cannot protect them. What can you do? You can prepare them. You can give them all the tools they need. You can be very frank with them. Of course, age appropriate. Don't hide the truth from them. Tell them exactly what, many different lives. Let them talk to other people and see other things. So now I'm just on a rant, so sorry.
No, that's great. That's so great. I think from a parenting perspective, yeah, you want to protect them and keep them from all that harm. But like you said, there's only so much you can do. So preparing definitely is the way to go. Monica, you've had your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute and ask your question, and then we'll get back to the chat question.
I've worked with a number of girls that are engaging in behaviors like meeting strangers on social media that put them at risk for trafficking later. And so when you talk to them, their comments are, those other girls are stupid. That's not going to happen to me. I know what I'm doing. So what could somebody have told you at 15 that would have convinced you that this was a bad idea? I mean, or is there anything, or would people, or were you just kind of like, I know what I'm doing?
Yeah, you remember, all 15-year-olds, we know everything. We know everything in the world. You cannot tell us anything. So, but what can you do? At least take this information for later. Just, keep this information, listen, there may be a friend of yours may need this information sometime. Somebody else, one of your friends may get trafficked by one of these individuals. So I need you to make sure you let her know what services are available to her and what she should do if she's ever in that situation. I need you to make sure that your friends, because your friends are important, right? And so that's where it is. Your friend may need to know the National Human Trafficking Hotline number. Your friend may need to know how to get out of a situation like this. So I want to make sure that you know so that you can help others. And I think that would, if you told me that I was helping somebody else, if you told me you're helping me, no, I was worthless. I was stupid. I could not see any value in myself. So why would I try and educate myself? But if you told me, hey, there are other girls out there, there are other people out there, you may meet somebody sometime that has this issue. Would you like to be in the position to be able to help that person? I would have totally said, yes, I want to be, in that position.
Thanks. Sounds good.
And remember, this is only one answer of 50 million. So that's the thing is, I always, I'm careful because this was me. You talk to Greg's other victims or anybody else, their answers are going to be different. So I would keep asking that question every single time you're on one of these things. Ask more questions because, everybody that you deal with is going to be a little bit different.
Thank you, Wendy. That was a great answer. Next question. Have your thoughts about God, your relationship with God, changed you as you have processed and healed from your trauma?
Yes. So I don't believe in the God of I believe, and this is my own little made up thing, but it's, it's where I feel comfortable because I can tell you that the Christian religion has been very traumatic and has hurt a lot of people that I have spoken to in my life, in the interactions that I've had with other people. One common denominator is the Christian religion, or maybe not the religion, but the people within that religion have hurt us, and that has been harmful. I believe in a God that is the God of all the religions. So the Bible and the Quran and Buddhist and all the other things. And I believe there are many paths to God and to eternal life or whatever the purpose is. We don't all have to be on the same exact path to get to, where we are trying to go, and so, yeah, I see the one, where is Greg today? So Greg, let me, I'm just going to try and share my screen. I don't know if this is going to work or not. Bear with me. So I'll kind of go slow. Greg was sentenced to, YouTube. Told you I can't multitask. Greg was sentenced to 10 years. He did 8 years. He, sorry. See, I told you, cannot multitask. He did 8 years. He got out while on parole and probation. Let me repeat that. While on parole and probation, not allowed to leave the state of Oregon, he started recruiting and trafficking more girls, more females, until finally for 4 years that happened. Let me share my screen here. Screen share, and I know we're almost out of time. I'm only going to play a couple of seconds of this. Oh, come on. I'm just not doing well here. wait a minute here. Okay, can you guys all see that? That's not letting me share my computer sound. Bear with me. It's not working. Oh.
It looks like Wendy may have.
Well, I guess that didn't work.
Okay.
So yeah, you can look up. So he ended up going back to prison. He's serving life in prison now. You can go onto YouTube and go Greg Hightower, Portland Pimp, and see the actual court case or see him being sentenced.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I know there's some more questions in the chat, but unfortunately for the sake of time, we kind of need to wrap up. Wendy, maybe we can get some answers, and that way for our next session or something, we can maybe give people some more information. So Amanda, if you want to take us out.
You bet. Thanks, Brooke. Thanks, Lizzie. And thank you so much, Wendy, for sharing your story and your experiences with us. We just have a couple minutes left, but we definitely want to make sure that we gather some feedback from you all about what you would like to hear about in our next Lunch and Learn in this series, which is February 24th. So Sarah is going to be sharing a link in the chat to an evaluation survey. Please, please, please share your feedback with us. We would greatly appreciate it. We'll be working on getting those certificates out. I do want to share just a few things before we go, though, that we can all do to help combat trafficking. Like Wendy said, it's about sowing seeds. It's about steps. It's not about swooping in and pulling someone out of the life. So one of the things you can do is memorize the National Human Trafficking phone number. That's 888-373-7888. You could also just program that into your cell phone. That might be easier, but you never know who's going to need that. You know, if you see something, say something, or provide a resource, that number could be a lifeline. Have a conversation about trafficking, consent, or healthy relationships with someone in your life. Plant those seeds. Donate to or volunteer at an organization in your community. There are several organizations in the Omaha area committed to anti-trafficking work, in addition to those sponsoring this training, such as Youth Emergency Services, Heartland Sanctuary, U-Turn, and Nebraska Urban Indian Health Coalition. Thank you so much for your time, for the conversations and questions and thoughts that were generated here. You know, this is just the beginning of a conversation. We're gonna have some more next month on the 24th and then again in March. But we really encourage everyone to have those conversations in between with the people in your life. So thank you so much. Have a great day.